Welcome to R&B. I'm Shea, Howell, your host and founder of FAAAM. In this episode, I had the pleasure of chopping it up with Senior Vice President, Group Creative Director of Digital Experience and Innovation for TBWA WorldHealth, Walter T. Geer III. We discussed the agency's Black Health Now campaign, racism in advertising, and his viral LinkedIn post on ageism that blew up the internet. Buckle up. Let's get into it with Walter T. Geer III.
Rhythm and blues.
The biggest reason why is because it tapped into a nerve of a lot of people who are affected by ageism, right? It's like ageism doesn't affect just a color, right? It's every single person will have to deal with it at one point in their life and or career.
The Rhythm and Blues Podcast.
Free your mind.
Thank you so much for joining me this afternoon on Rhythm and Blues, my new podcast for FAAAM. We celebrate the rhythm and analyze the blues of Black culture through the lens of marketing and advertising. And who better to talk to, especially at this time, than Walter T. Geer III. So thanks again for joining me on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Your accolades, there's a long list of things that I have written down here. All of them extremely impressive, a 20-year veteran, right? And they run the gamut, not your typical profile that you'll find on LinkedIn. You are a sport bike racer. Do you still race?
I took a little bit of time off because of my daughter, but I was planning to get back out this summer, but that's a wrap now.
Track and field All-American, multi-patent holder. We'll talk a little bit about that. Biometric lab creator. Savoy magazine listed you as one of the 2020 most influential Black execs in corporate America.
They did.
Yeah. Currently, you're the Senior Vice President, Group Creative Director of Digital Experience and Innovation at TBWA WorldHealth. Yeah. You know, FAAAM we're advocates or champions for the accurate and inclusive representation of African Americans in marketing and advertising. So when was the last time you felt represented?
I don't know that I have in a while, right? And especially now in a time when our voices are so needed. It's unfortunate because, you know, we people of color are dying at numbers that are just outrageous and absurd. And I don't know that there's anyone or anything right now that has really kind of made me feel, you know, inspired and represented right now, because there's just a lack of us having the right conversation in this space. And truth be said, that's the sad thing, right? Like it's
yeah.
You know, the only thing I'm hearing right now amidst this pandemic is, you know, put on a mask, put on some gloves and stay at home. But it's not enough. So right. I apologize, but I don't know that I have anything that I could say on that.
I think that is part of the reason why I asked the question.
Yeah, okay.
Because I think
a question. I was like,
well, no, not totally a trick question, but I think for some people it runs the gamut, right? You might have something that speaks to a particular area of your life, but then you might stand in a space as a person of color that, like you, there isn't anything where you feel actually represented, right? We already know that there's a lack of representation. So if there is a space that there isn't anything that you're connecting to, it just speaks to the fact that there's so much more work that needs to be done. So we met like a year and a half ago when I launched FAAAM, and you kind of saw what we stood for and reached out to me on LinkedIn, which was more than a surprise. There were quite a few people, but I think you were the first to say that you believed in, you know, what we were doing, and if there's any way that you could help, that you would. And we started to talk, and I think since that time you already had a very strong voice in the space, but over the last year or so, it seems as if it's amplified. And there are two people that I think have an authentic and very real voice in the marketing space. The first one that I found was Bozoma St. John. Oh. And the next one for me has been you. And I think the connectors between the two is that you all are authentic in a way that most people have a level of apprehension. Like, you will say what you think, when you think it, how you feel it, and that is part of what continues to kick up dust, right? To bring disruption to the norm. So let's talk a little bit about your voice. How did you get here to a space that you felt comfortable to express how you feel, especially as a Black man in a corporate environment? Or have you always kind of felt like you could?
No, that's a good question, and thank you for even putting me in the same sentence as her, because she's phenomenal. That's a good question, because I think that it takes a long time for people to get there, and it took me a long time to get there. I'll cue that up with a story real quick. When I was young, we were just talking about getting haircuts, right? There's a guy who used to cut my hair, this guy named Don. And Don, it was upstate New York in a town called Schenectady. And Don would have a line like around the block to get into his barbershop every Saturday. Now he cut, like everyone loved his cuts. It was amazing. Thing is though, when you get in there, you had to scream when you're asking for what to get cut, because he's partially deaf. Now the thing about it though was, I'd say like, yo, Don, just take a little bit off the top. He'd feel like he'd give me a thumbs up. He'd cut, turn me around, pull the cape off, and all my shit is gone, right? And I'm like, oh my God. But then I'm like,
no.
right. And I'm like, oh wow, it actually looks good, right? And so and then I'd pay Don and I'd up and leave. Now I bring that story up because I tell people a lot to be Don, right? And when I say be Don, that means like Don was confident about his shit, right? He knew that he had a disability. He couldn't fully hear. He also knew that no matter whichever way he decided to cut your shit, it was going to be good. You were going to like it, and you were going to pay for it. But that takes confidence in who you are and what you do and your skills. So I say that because it took me a long time to get that comfortable. And I think as a creative in this space, we often feel when you're Black that I need to walk a certain way. I need to dress a certain way. I need to talk, carry myself a certain way. If I'm too loud, I'm going to come off as an angry Black man. If I'm disengaged, I'm going to come off as I don't care. So it's like a tight rope, right, that you walk. And I don't know that I really was able to have that voice until probably about like 6 or 7 years ago. But then like I had become a vice president, and I had established somewhat of a career. And I was also in a space where other people made me feel confident. And I had a boss who would tell me just like, yo, like say what's on your mind. You need to tell people what's up or you're not going to get it done. So I had people that made me feel okay with being myself. And then it just kind of got to a point where I have like diarrhea of the mouth, and I just kind of say whatever the fuck comes to mind. I'm not disrespectful, but I try to be authentic in what I say. And I think that's what's probably made, people, agree with some of the things that I say maybe.
So being as confident as you are and as vocal as you are, you have the ear of the industry, right? The respect of the industry. Is there a time in particular that you can remember that you used your voice that it didn't go so well?
Gosh, probably a lot of times. I mean, yeah. All right, so I'm gonna break this down. I'm gonna be really transparent here. Whenever I speak, or when I speak particularly to Black audiences, at colleges, at events, I make it very known that I feel as though we aren't doing enough. And when I say we aren't doing enough, Black executives who are in leadership positions that are people of color, we have a very serious issue with getting to the table and forgetting to turn around and reach back, right? To bring other people to the table. So I do bring that up quite a bit, and I have not been afraid of shying away from the fact that I feel that a lot of, not all, but a lot of diversity officers shuck and jive. They hop on the stage from here to there, and all over the place, and they talk a good game, but like when you don't have a budget, you don't have a real voice in the room, right? So it's a larger topic of conversation, but I feel as though I've talked about that quite a bit on stages. I've gone to events, and I do feel shunned at some of these places, right? Because there are those Black executives or folks in diversity who kind of look at me as, oh, this motherfucker's trying to call me out. When in actuality, I am trying to voice the truth and make sure that we have change. So that's probably it. it's a weird place because like I will come off stage and half of the people will give me hugs and, praise me. Oh my gosh, that's great. I'm so happy you said that. No one says that. Someone needs to say that. And then there's the others who turn a cold shoulder and walk the other way.
Let's talk a little bit about your journey to advertising. How did you get here?
By a lie.
This is going to be good.
Yeah. I came out of college, had no idea what I wanted to do. My dad was an engineer, worked at, GE and Duracell for years. I knew I always wanted to be like him, but I had no idea what an engineer was. Got out of college, I had no idea what I wanted to do. And he was like, you should get into this web design stuff. And I was like, it was like 99. I was like, I barely had an email address.
Right.
And he literally one day says, hey, I got you a job interview at Trans World Entertainment, which at the time was the largest music distributor in the world. Clearly they're shut down now. I went to the interview not really knowing what it was other than my dad said, hey, this is about web design. They asked, do you know HTML? I was like, yeah. Do you know JavaScript? I was like, yep. Do you know Photoshop? I was like, yep. You got the job. Can you start in 2 weeks? Can I start in 3? I went to the library and studied my ass off. I then continued to learn on the job. And I never got caught. So I got in by way of a lie, I'll say.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. At any point,
Go ahead, please.
No, you go ahead.
I'm not saying that everyone should lie in their job interviews. I'm just saying it worked for me 20 something years ago.
Yeah, well, it obviously had to be the space that was made for you, because if you were a complete fraud and that's not where you're supposed to be, I doubt 20 years later you still be in the space.
No, most certainly not. Most certainly not.
That's a good story. That is good. Let's talk about what you currently have going on with TBWA in terms of #Black Health Now. So tell me a little bit about the campaign, how it started, and where we are now.
It's a really interesting one. And truth be said, like probably the work I feel most proud of throughout my career. So why I'm proud of it is for a few different reasons. Is you will never, show me an agency, show me a company who would actually have these conversations, real conversations about why Black people of color are being affected in such a manner. But it was actually 2 of my counterparts. So I worked with 2 other people on this, Wally Holloway and Brian Gaffin. Wally was in a diversity meeting that we had at the agency. She was inspired by the conversations they were having. She went and talked to Brian about her personal story, which he felt inspired about. Brian came back and talked to me and said, the 3 of us need to get together. We should do something. And it was like the beginning. It was probably the first week of February. So it was Black History Month. And we kind of sat back and said, wow, what could we do around these health disparities? Because these are real issues at hand. And what was more frustrating is that when you looked around at a lot of other agencies and companies, they were doing stuff like, let's put, like, not even kidding you, I saw people's story posted like, Beyonce 24 hours around the clock for Black History Month. Or like, we got soul food for Black History Month. And it was like real fucked up. And so our approach was, let's be authentic in what we do, and let's actually have a conversation that people are afraid to have. So the conversation was around the fact that we believe, which is the truth, that there is systemic racism and bias that's built into the healthcare system. And this is why, Black women are 3 times more likely to die than a white woman given birth. This is why, like, a Black infant is twice as likely to die than a white infant. This is like I can go through the facts forever and ever. But the bigger problem is many people have seen these facts, and facts happen to be numbers on pages, and numbers on pages are very easy to glance or gloss over. And so I like to say that, people did not know that police brutality was a thing until they saw Rodney King being beat on the side of the street, right? So it's seeing someone's story and seeing something that, that represents, someone being in a negative situation. This is the stuff that is impactful. And this is when people realize this is a real problem. So our idea was, let's tell people stories. And we allowed our 7 or 8 coworkers to come forward and tell their stories. So there were 2-minute segments and powerful stuff. And I'm telling you, when we sat in these rooms and filmed these things, like, I cried multiple times because it was painful to hear how horrific these stories were of parents or grandparents dying, of them almost dying at the hands of doctors who didn't necessarily care about their health. We were that was kind of our phase one approach. As we were going into our phase two, which is providing tools and actionable stuff for people of color to go into doctors' offices with, COVID hit. We put everything on hold. The numbers came back out again afterwards about how, we were dying at higher numbers of white people. Clearly shining a light on what we had already been putting out. And it was just, I've had so many people reach out to us and say that, like, oh my God, you guys were so much ahead of a curve. Like, you guys started this conversation before it was a thing. So we felt the need to continue, but unlike what we see happening now with just people randomly toggling more facts again on the news and in papers and online, we decided to take action, because there's 0 people out here that are actually taking real action. And action for people of color right now is self-care, telling them to take care of themselves, because there are things you can control, there's things you can't. Like racism, we can't control these things, right?
Right.
We can most certainly control the things we eat, right? We can control the things we cook. We can control the fact that we are exercising or not. So our point was to tap into the culture by bringing in celebrities and athletes and social media influencers, people that we recognize, and doing things like talk about healthy eating, showing people like Marcus Samuelson, who cooked in his kitchen for us and showed us how to build a healthy meal with basic stuff that's in your fridge. It is working with like Ashley Everett, who was Beyonce's dance captain. She showed everyone how to dance for 15, 20 minutes, how to dance to a formation, the dance steps to formation. It was like Tiana Bartoletto, who's a 3-time gold medalist, doing like a 15-minute workout that you can do in a 6 by 6 foot space with no weights, no nothing. So it's about inspiring us to do better with self-care.
How long is the campaign? Is it currently still running? Where and when can people catch it?
Yeah, it's still running. I don't know that I think this is one of those things that will run for quite some time, right? Because like the platform is so big and so flexible that it allows us to hold multiple conversations about our health. So again, this is like, we signed up for this knowing that this is not going to be hey, we're done at the end of February, but this is something that's just going to continue on. They can follow it. Anyone can follow it if you follow like TBWA WorldHealth online, LinkedIn, you'll see posts there, on Instagram, or my account where we do all the live streams, which is at Third Geer, which is 3RDGEER. We try to do it weekly events where we're doing these interviews, just kind of making sure that we're staying on topic. Again, like either providing facts and busting myths, or providing actionable tools and things that people can do. So like this last one we did this last week was actually with essential workers. So we had a bus driver, a physical therapist assistant, and a courier, right? A package courier, a delivery man, who all talked about their experiences. And what was like powerful, like the delivery guy had said, he said, when I go to people's doors, he said, they look at me funny. They look at me like I have COVID, right? And he's like, and he's like, it's an uncomfortable feeling for me, because I feel like, I feel like the same way, like I'm looking at you the same way you're looking at me. And so it was hard conversations, but ones that people need to hear and understand.
I think it's commendable that 1, you all were ahead of the curve. 2, that the agency is committed to it in a way that is not a expiration date or an end date to the campaign, but actually to the cause, and doing what's necessary to make sure that the information is delivered to the audience that it is designed for, and that it can be as effective as possible. Oftentimes when we have campaigns or initiatives like this, it's kind of like, especially during Black History Month, there's a time that like, okay, what are we going to do? It's the Beyonce's 24 hours around the clock. And it's kind of like, oh, it's a nod of sorts. It's not real work that's being done, and that's being committed to the overall cause. So that's extremely commendable. Your voice and that of your team is really strong in the space, and respected. And so for those of us on the outside that have the benefit of watching, and then those of us in the industry who have an opportunity to point to something in particular, to say, this is what I mean, right? This is the kind of campaign and initiative that the community is hungry for. This is what it means to be effective. And I'm not sure if it would have been executed in the same way if we weren't in the middle of a global pandemic, but from doing lives and, just the execution of it and the success, is a great case study. So thanks so much for that.
Oh no, thank you, thank you. It's been interesting in that you don't often see many. I'm like I said, the people that I work with are so authentic, and it's amazing that we can actually have these conversations out in the public around things that really matter, right? So
Right.
It's great. We feel that the message is powerful, and we're excited to be able to actually deliver to it. And to be honest with you, help people of color, right? Because that's what this is all about. Like, there's not enough voices out there that are having these conversations. So for us, we felt the need to step up front and do something, actionable about it.
Last November, you responded on LinkedIn. I'm going to read your viral posts from LinkedIn.
All right.
Yeah. 40 under 40 and 30 under 30. I'm not impressed. Show me 40 over 40 and 50 over 50. Put a spotlight on the hard work that this group of individuals is doing while juggling life at home with a spouse and kids. I gave you a standing ovation at that point. That would impress me. Who's going to step up and own this? Is there not any talent over 40 that deserves to be awarded? Do you agree? That obviously was the sentiment of so many of us. I'll raise my hand and say I am over 40. And I have oftentimes joked that if we could take the life skills that are necessary for our lives, right, to maintain it, multitasking, families, bills, all of those things, and put those on a resume, it would speak life in a completely different way.
Yeah.
What made you say this? Because Forbes said you blew up the internet, and it was something like that.
That was an interesting thing. When that went viral, it was one of those things I didn't expect to go viral. I don't know that you can post stuff with the intent that, oh, everyone's going to pick this up, it's going to go crazy. So yeah, it went viral, and I guess the first call I actually got, the first real call when it started to blow up, was from my cousin. And my cousin's like, "You see this post?" And he screenshotted it and sent it to me, and I was like, "What the hell?" I mean, it was crazy. It was like 2 million impressions, like 16,000 likes and shares. It was wild. But again, I think that the biggest reason why is because it tapped into a nerve of a lot of people who are affected by ageism, right? It's like ageism doesn't affect just a color, right? It's every single person will have to deal with it at one point in their life and or career.
Right. And you were on a panel that talked a little bit about ageism.
Yeah, I was. We did. It was. They had some really interesting folks who chimed in, and it was interesting to get everyone's point of view. I didn't pull the black card on that one, but I think that it's often that when people ask, because I talk about ageism a lot, people say, well, have you dealt with ageism yourself? And truth be told, is like, no. Fortunately, I haven't yet, but I most certainly know what it's like to walk into a room and be black, right? And have someone, when they see the name Walter Geer III, right? I'm sure they're not expecting someone like me to come walk into the door.
Right.
And I know what that's like, and I can't say that that's the same, but I do know the feeling of going someplace and being looked at a certain way because of my color, or in this instance, your age, right?
So you mentioned not pulling the black card during the panel that you were on last week. So one, explain what it is that you mean, and then two, when and how do you choose to pull the black card?
So what I meant by that is that I think I try to be authentic, right? But I also try not to rub people the wrong way. And I think that we had a great conversation. The bulk of it did boil down to, it clearly on ageism, that was the topic of discussion, but then it was also heavy on women, which there were certain people on that's their thing, right? That's their career and kind of that's their platform. So I didn't feel as though I had the right opportunity to bring up that issue. So I just kind of put it on hold for a minute. Like, I think that there's a right place for everything, right? And this is why being Black and in our space, you have to pick and choose your battles, right? And there's a right time and right place for everything. And clearly this is one of those conversations, right? that you and I are having now.
Right.
Right. But it's an interesting thing. I mean, these are the things we juggle and struggle with, as you know, when you start to have a voice and or platform. Now I feel like a lot of people listen, and I've gotten to a place of, if I say the wrong thing in the wrong place, and that could come down me. But I'll say that does not mean that I'm not authentic and true to my word and my feelings and what I believe in. That is just that I know at times when to bite my tongue.
I think that's important to note, right? It's like, just because we have a voice, we have a space in which we operate, we shouldn't be shouting from the mountaintop at all times. That different situations call for different responses. There is a time and a place unto all things, right? And so inserting yourself in a way that, one, you didn't feel was authentic, like it's a matter of filling out the space, what you're talking about. I think that's really important, especially for a lot of people that might be looking at you to say, well, and maybe they just got the highlights, right, of who you are. And they've seen the ad week, they've seen the Forbes, they've seen the virality that you found with your voice. And for, younger creatives or people in the industry that might feel like, okay, I need to use my voice and I want to use it in this particular way, but understanding that there's a level of management and maturity and responsibility that comes along with that is really important.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. It's a difficult one, but I'm still learning. Look, I mean, it's weird. I don't look at myself as an influencer. I really don't. There are people that's like, you're an influencer. I don't have hundreds of thousands of people that listen to me. I have a few, and sometimes they take note. But my thing is just like, I often say this, that, right, even with the work I work on, the things I do, even with Black Health now, if I can help influence one person, then my job is done, right? Like, if I could change one life, then that's all that really matters.
I mentioned in your laundry list of accomplishments that at this point, how many patents do you hold?
6.
Let's talk a little bit about what those are, how you got there, how they're being used for the lay people who don't work in the digital and innovation space. What are those?
I won't go through all of them. I'll say a few of them that most people would probably recognize, because they're probably the ones that annoy you and the rest of the world on a daily basis. One was skippable pre-roll, right? So that is when you get an ad, you get the ad before a video, YouTube or any one of these places, and then you get in the right corner, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and skip, right? So that was me. The interesting concept around that was that originally it was about how do we actually, instead of, because no one watches pre-roll, everyone hates commercials, and now we're just like forced to watch them online every time you click on a piece of content. So the idea originally was, okay, well, if people aren't going to sit here and watch the content, what if we can actually get them to interact with the brand before, instead of watching it? So before, it was a 30-minute commercial, a pre-roll. And then the first one we had was a mock we did with, I think it was Pepsi. Yeah. And there's a small Pepsi bottle. And when you actually tapped on it, then you can control the Pepsi bottle and pour the Pepsi on top of the commercial. So fill up the screen. And then as soon as the screen's filled up, boom, just kicks you to the content that you wanted to see in the first place. So it's about interacting with the brand. And then eventually it kind of just became a very, let's just skip it and get it out of the way type of thing. So then it's the onus has been put on the brand to make sure that they have a powerful enough content within the first 5 seconds that would make someone want to continue to engage. The other one that's not a patent, but one that probably people will recognize the most is I created with a small team at the New York Times years ago, and that was called sequential messaging. So sequential messaging is, when you go to a website to go shop for something, a pair of jeans or shoes or something, you decide not to get it, you go someplace else, Instagram, Facebook, wherever it is you go. And it's like that item is following you every place you go for numerous days. sequential messaging. So we invented that. That's probably the one that's the most recognizable, that format. But then I did other patents, or one's called like the HD skin, which is now, when you go to set a website and you see video skins the entire background of a site, like that as well. So those are just a handful of some of them. But I'll tell you, it's a long process to get a patent, because I created those in 2012, 2013, and some of those patents literally came in within the last year.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a long time. People think it's you apply and you get it in a couple months. No, it's several years.
So we're talking racism in advertising. Last year before last, it seemed as if there was something in the water, because every couple days, every couple weeks, there was someone that had some sort of egregious misstep, if we like to call it that had the community in an uproar, that required an apology and new programs and a variety of different things that the brand was trying to manage from a public relations standpoint. And so it seemed to have been quiet for a little while, because we've kind of got a lot going on right now. So I saw this the other day, and it's not an ad, which quite a few of the ones that we'd seen not too long ago haven't necessarily been US ads, but ads nonetheless that we have access to. How does this keep happening, right? You have a purview into the agency environment, an overview of client interactions, approvals, running creative teams. How does this keep happening?
Yeah, it's an easy one. There's no people of color in the room, right? And if there are people of color in the room, they have no voice, right? Let me be clear. It is not an easy thing to be the only person of color in a room when you're dealing with the brand. I have been in some interesting situations myself where I've identified stuff that I feel is racist, that wasn't done intentionally by people, but when they recognize it as well, it's a bit of a oh shit moment for everyone in the room. But it's also an uncomfortable feeling. At first it was, when I started doing this, because when you're the one black person in the room and there's 8 or 9 other people and everyone's going through them pitching the ideas, and then you have to raise your hand and say, this is kind of racist. It's a weird thing, right? So I think it takes a certain someone who can actually stand up and actually say that and address it. So there's, and I'm not going to point out anyone in particular, but there's been brands in the past who've done things that I've felt were inappropriate, and I've had conversations with, and those brands had said that they had people in the room that were, looked like me. But when I hear that, I often go back to, okay, well, maybe their voice isn't strong enough, or maybe I don't know. It's a difficult thing. You have to realize that, in this space in advertising, there are very, very few people of color who are in senior leadership positions on the creative side, right? So, another, friend of mine, another creative director who's black, we created a list of all the black creative directors in our space, in advertising, in the ad agency world. And we went from director up to creative chief officer, and chief creative officer, excuse me. And what was interesting is we've only come up with a list of about 37 people. And of that list, 7 or 8 are senior vice president and above, right? So when you start to talk about being in the room, and then when you're in the room, making sure that you're someone who has the authority and power to make change, to drive change, or make comments that matter, that everyone will listen to. There's not many of us, right? I am one of 7 or 8, and it's a sad thing. So, I've also been in a place where I've gone to work on a first day of a job, and sat in a desk where a previous officer had sat, and had his things still left there, and there, so some of his tchotchkes and stuff was still left in the window, and buried in between all of that was a blackface doll. Right. And this is an individual who was leading all of creative for this company.
And when we sit and talk about like, well, how come we're not seeing people of color in the room? Well, when you have your head of creative who is at a blackface doll sitting in his window, that'll tell you part of the reason. So it's real talk. It's you know, and you know, we need, and this is back to my earlier point of like of you know, chief diversity officers and really stepping forward and doing shit, and companies need to give them budgets, right? Because without some budgets, they have no say. They can't do anything. They're a token. This is also why I say people like myself who are in these senior positions, we need to do more with reaching back, right? And pulling other people up, you know, up in agencies and companies, and specifically agencies, since we're talking about advertisers now, need to do a better job of being diverse and inclusive of all. That is age, that is color, that is gender, sexual orientation. It is all of that. And it's only when you bring all those people together that you can do your best work. You know, the Black Health Now campaign, it's me, another Black woman, and another white guy. Right, like so, like it is a mixed group of people, and without having these voices, I mean, this other young woman who her name is Wally Holloway, she's associate managing partner, right? So she's very senior at our agency. But back to my point, like, would Black Health Now probably happen if there weren't two executives that were Black at an agency? You know, right. So having people in those positions, that's how you influence, that's how you make change, that's how you make better creative. Having more people that are diverse at the table.
How much of this do you think is the community being overly sensitive or actual racism in the executions?
I think it's both. And some people might hate me for saying that, but I think that we're in a time right now where we're all hypersensitive. When you have I'm not gonna watch what I say. Now here we go. See, this is me tiptoeing. We are in a space right now where we are hypersensitive because there are people in leadership positions, I'll say, that feel as though we can say things, like we could say what we want, right? And I think that we are now in a country where people feel that they can just come off their chest and say like whatever's on the top of my head. So we are seeing people's true colors right now. And because of that, I think that everyone is overly, you know, like, conscious about things, right? It's like, you know, you say Black and someone's like, wait, what Black what? Like, what you gonna say after that?
Sure.
So I think that, right, so there's some of that for sure. But I think that there's also like, there's a lot of intent on some of these things as well. So it's most certainly a mixture.
Is there anything else that you wanted to add or initiatives that you wanted to talk about?
We are in a time right now where we are all at a level playing ground. And when I say level playing ground, in terms of technology, in terms of the platforms we have access to, I tell people all the time that we can start these conversations, right? It shouldn't just be me. It shouldn't just be Don Lennon. It shouldn't be like, there are a lot of people who can have these conversations. Sometimes it's as easy as liking a post where someone kind of talks about this stuff and about helping us. It's easy as sharing that post, right? And it's easy as you just using your voice. You know, people, when we look at this pandemic and get to the other side of it, I think that very quickly we are all going to be able to look around the room and identify in a heartbeat who were the people that were actually authentic and actually stepped up and did something, and who were the people that actually stayed home and did jack shit, right? And again, it doesn't mean you need to be in Forbes magazine or all over the place. It can be as simple as helping other people, helping someone, helping a family member, a friend. Now's an opportunity and a chance where we should be doing more for one another because we're all in this together.
The name of the podcast is Rhythm and Blues. While it doesn't reference music in particular, I'm going to ask, what is on your playlist? What are you listening to now?
You want me to be honest? I'm listening to whatever my daughter puts on Alexa. No. Which truth be told, which would be like Lion King right about now. No, I think that's a good question. I'll give you a couple things. I've been listening to a lot of Post Malone lately, which has been odd, right? But I can tell you this, every time I get on stage, the one song that gets me really pumped up, and I listen to it every single time, is Kendrick Lamar, and I'm gonna forget the name of it now.
Humble.
Will
be all right. It's Humble.
Yes, Humble. Yes, thank you very much. So that is my go-to song. Like, if you ever see me at an event and I'm about to get on, I'll have my headphones on right before they call my name. That's what I'm listening to.
tell everybody where they can find you. And you have an app, a music app?
My brother and friends and I, we launched a music app solely for independent artists to give them their own kind of place and playing ground, called Quarry, spelled Quarry. It is only for independent artists. It's invite only. Beautiful thing about it is because of that, we can actually curate all the content. We have over almost 600 artists in it from all over every corner of the world, from like winners from American Idol to like the a whole slew. And it's just a different type of content. I mean, we're most certainly not in competition with like a Spotify or Pandora. We see it as just another playlist option to listen to, because independent music is a huge thing. I mean, 91.3% of music in the world is independent. 0.3% are major mainstream artists, which is why we continue to listen to the same artists day in, day out, every time you turn on something. So it's just a different platform with different styles of music from around the world.
So where can everybody find you?
They can find me, I guess, mostly on Instagram or Twitter. They're all the same. It's at 3RDGEERS, at Third Gears. That is like my name on pretty much any platform you can find me.
Well, thanks for joining me on Rhythm and Blues. I appreciate you.
Thank you for having me. This is a great conversation. I'm glad to be a part of this.